Hey everybody, Makeup Monday time. You want to be part of this, don't you? So I know normally I've got something super fun going on, a makeup demo, answering questions, making a mess. But today we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of bring it back to the education side. I was scrolling through the group going, what haven't we talked about for a while? And I've been focusing on fun, because that's how I roll. But the education is a critical piece to our mission, and that component is really what we're based on. So I do so many education events outside of this group that I think sometimes I lose focus. So I apologize, you guys. I want to bring it back to our core. So what we're going to talk about today, it's still makeup related because it's really contaminants. Colored cosmetics, which is all makeup, right? Because makeup has color in it. That's the whole purpose of it. Are very, very susceptible to being contaminated, but unintentionally contaminated with toxins. One of the reasons is many colors are made from minerals of some sort. Guess what? Lots of toxins. Lead is a mineral. So they might come up in the soil, they might come up in some type of the production unintentionally. So you are not going to turn your lipstick around, your eyeshadow around, your blush around and see on the label lead, mercury, arsenic. You're not going to see those things because they are coming in with another ingredient, okay? And I apologize, I'm probably gonna stumble over my words a little bit. This is not the education piece, although so critical. I can talk super fast and super educated about makeup and skincare products and how it all works, but this part is stuff that I've really had to learn over my journey because I was completely not aware of it, even though I've been to probably 7 different product trainings, makeup trainings, been in esthetician school, been in different makeup classes. This is not something that we are ever educated on, which is even more important why we need to be educating, right? Because if I'm in this industry and I didn't know this, the average person doesn't know it. So I'm going to tell a little story because this is one that really stuck in my head, that our chief scientific officer, I think is his name, he does all of the science and all of he's the brains behind the product creation and development. He is the scientist, the mad chemist in there, making sure our products are adhering to the safety regulations that we put in place, but also perform, okay? So he tells this story. His name is Xavier Ormancy. Look him up. He is a product guru, genius, ingredient extraordinaire. He is from France. And he told a story last year at Summit about this topic, about contamination and why it's important, even though we have the Never List in place, right? You guys are all familiar with our Never List, 1,500 ingredients that we promise. We have banned from our labs. We have banned from ever being involved. So 1,500 known health offenders or highly suspected health offenders out. Cannot even be considered to be put in our formulations, okay? So we've taken European standards and upped it by 100. We have a very rigorous ingredient selection process in place, a 5-step ingredient selection process that includes, I wrote it down because I can never remember all of them. Okay, Never List is step 1. Ingredient research, taking all past case studies, and conducting their own studies, so taking all of that into play. Constantly learning and researching because there's huge data gaps out there on certain ingredients. So they're going to take everything that everyone else has learned or researched before and constantly be learning. So we are constantly adding an ingredient or two to our Never List as we find it, and testing for performance as well. Anyway, so we've got our ingredient. This is not about ingredient selection process, so I don't want to harp too much on that, but a very, very thorough ingredient selection process and how we pick what we put in there. Okay, so even with our Never List and our intense ingredient selection process, contamination can still occur. And if it can occur with us, I tell you what, it is absolutely occurring across the board. I'm going to share a couple articles in the comments of different recent news articles that people have found taken products that they've purchased independently to labs and say test it, and almost every single time they find extremely high traces of lead, of arsenic, of mercury, of all these things that you're going, what the heck? I mean, products that are sold in like Claire's and Justice for our little girls, but also stuff for us. There's huge amounts of, what's it called, counterfeit makeup out there on the market that is almost all going to be contaminated because it's used with the cheapest, the dirtiest, the nastiest of the nasty. So contaminants can get into our marketplace too, because there are only about 6 inspectors in the FDA responsible for screening something like 30 million things that are coming into the country on a monthly basis. So it's pretty understaffed, okay, to begin with. So they can just put them in there because it probably won't get caught. The FDA is not screening every single product, not even a fraction of it. I mean, they're barely screening anything at all. And they're trusting what's on labels, and labels are not, they're very underregulated, okay? But back, I digress to my story that Xavier told us. So when they were in production, probably 2 years ago at this point, of a brand new product that launched last year, everything is in place, right? Our ingredient selection process, boom, everything passed. Our never list, not a single item on our never list is in there. The performance, incredible. So they make this small batch to test, and then here's the thing, Beautycounter has a post-production screening process as well. So they screen every single batch that they make before it's put into marketplace to make sure that if a contamination has happened, that line is pulled. But they kept finding very trace amounts of BPA. Now, BPA is something that we don't even want in our like cups and our plastic, right? Because BPA is bad for us. We know that. That is something that is absolutely not a theory, that we know that is linked to cancer and bad stuff, and we don't want to be ingesting it. So when we buy plastics that we are going to be eating and drinking out of, you want to make sure it's BPA free. Anything that's touching our skin, touching our mouth, BPA free, okay? So they're finding BPA in it, and they're like, what on earth? How is BPA turning up in our lotion? We're not using any of none of our containers have BPA in it, none of our production containers have BPA in it. What's going on? So they're testing, they're like, what the heck? How is this happening? And so they backtrack. Now, mind you, BPA is not illegal to have in a product, okay? It's not illegal. So any other company, 1, they're not gonna screen it afterwards, but 2, they're gonna be like, so what? It's not illegal, it's okay. But morally, it's not okay. So they hold off. They're doing the research to figure out how this is happening, because it just is kind of mind-boggling. They backtracked it to one of the ingredients is a rose petal. Okay, so Xavier tells this story with his deep French accent. Oh, the farmers, they are picking the rose petals out in out in France, and they're putting them on these containers on the side of the fields, right? And then I don't know how it works in the fields. The farmers come, they pick it up, they load up the rose petals, right? Take it to the lab, and we start to extract the rose petal essence, or whatever we're using the rose petals for in this ingredient. Well, everything in the soil tested fine. Everything in the roses tested fine. But you know what the roses were put in? Plastic bags. And then they were sitting on the side of the field for a while in the sun. So just the simple act of the sun heating up the bags and the rose petals sitting in there, saturating it, the BPA melted, absorbed into the rose petals during that process, during the heat. It sat there, it kind of saturated in it. And so from the BPA leaching into the rose petals in the sun, and then those rose petals being put into it, BPA was found in the product. So needless to say, okay, let's get these girls some linen bags, or something that's not plastic, and we're gonna redo this again. And so then the next batch that they made, clean, passed. Okay, so that's something that lit this light bulb up in me, because there's so many ways that things can get contaminated along the supply chain process, it's not just in the lab, like, whoopsie, I spilled something. That's what I was thinking was a contaminant, a whoopsie in the lab that nobody caught. But that, that could happen to Beautycounter, sure, but it's absolutely going to be found because of the post-production screening process. But anything in our lab is not whoopsie, right? It's already taken all of the things that are on the never list are already removed from our lab to begin with. So that really had an eye-opening effect to me because I hadn't really thought much about contaminants. Like, how common can it be? Well, it's extremely common. Something like 65% of the lipsticks on the market today contain lead, a higher amount of lead than anybody wants in their bodies. So I pulled up a couple quick facts on some of these common contaminants, okay? So lead, we all know that we shouldn't use lead, but I've had a lot of people ask, like, why? What's it bad for? So exposure of lead in small amounts over a long period of time, that's called chronic toxicity, okay? And that's what basically all of our product toxins are. It's a long period of a slow drip. So our body's accepting these poisons. They're not fighting it off because it's not this overdose of toxins in the body for our body's immune system to recognize it and push it away. So it's able to have these long-term effects and changes on our fertility, on developing slow growth tumors in our breasts or wherever. So lead is particularly dangerous because once it gets into the system, remember, it's a mineral. So it's distributed throughout the body just like helpful minerals like iron, like calcium, like zinc. It goes all over the body, whether we absorb it in our skin or ingesting it, okay? So it's bad because it can wreak havoc on everything. Wherever it happens to land in the body, it's bad. It's not like, well, maybe we're just gonna pee it out. It's floating around in there, not doing good. Okay, so exposure to lead wreaks havoc on the brain. It wreaks havoc with consequences such as lower IQ, reduced potential for learning. So with babies, that's why it was finally outlawed in little guys, because guess what they do? They chew on everything, right? Cribs, walls. But even back then, trying to get lead out of paint was a huge process, something people had to advocate for, something people had to educate on. I've seen ads looking up saying, and I'll post it in the comments here, I've posted on this group before, saying, not only do my walls look nice, they're yummy too. And it was sold in flavors. Paint for your walls, with like a picture of a baby going, like licking the walls. I mean, that's ridiculous, but it also shows the extent of which companies and marketing will go for us to think this is normal, this is fine, this isn't a big deal, okay? So exposure to lead, because it's wreaking havoc on the brain, because it's having a potential for learning deficits, we really don't want babies on it, and it alters the way the nerve cells in the brain work. So we've all heard people having lead poisoning. Lead poisoning, it's a thing, and why increase our risk to it? Why increase our exposure to it? Okay, so let's see. The other thing, aluminum. Aluminum's often a mineral contaminant. So aluminum affects memory, concentration, higher risk for Alzheimer's. We all know we don't want aluminum in our deodorant, right? We don't want aluminum in our makeup either. Mercury. I think everybody knows mercury is not good for us, right? It affects our nervous system, lungs. It can be fatal. And like, I love tuna sandwiches, right? So I don't want mercury in anything else. Like, if I'm going to get any exposure to anything, it's going to be my tuna fish sandwiches, not my lipstick or my eyeshadow. Arsenic. Arsenic, you guys. Arsenic is like in old movies. Wouldn't they put arsenic to poison people? Like, arsenic's a known poison. It's extremely carcinogenic. It, causes cancers of the bladder, the lungs. There is no research that would imply that arsenic is not a big deal. Okay, we'll just put it at that. Like, we know arsenic, no good for us. So why would we be okay with using something that might be contaminated with that? And I mean, Google it. Google contaminants in cosmetics. There is no lack of information, okay? There's so many news articles, there's so many independent studies, because they all have to be independent, because you know what? Any other company other than Beautycounter, I don't know of, that is testing their products to pull them from the shelves before. They're putting them on the shelves and hoping that nobody sees. Nobody says anything, nobody tests it, nobody knows any difference. All right, so that's a little bit on contaminants, and the reason why it's even more prevalent. Now, not to say that body repair, lotions, potions, and whatnot, those can definitely have contaminations in them, but focusing specifically on the contaminants that are mineral contaminants in makeup, because that's what it's more likely to be. Okay. All right, hope that sheds some light on this topic. Post questions in the comments, and I will answer as best as I can. It usually takes a little bit of research on my part, but I definitely can. All right, bye Memphis. Thanks for being a good boy. Can you say bye to everybody? Oh, you want to get that phone, huh? All right. Bye guys. Thanks for tuning in.